This is a video record of a historic lake trip of the Canada Steamship Line's steamer Black Bay in midsummer of 1986. The Black Bay and her sister ship, the Murray Bay, were engaged in hauling the last of the taconite iron ore pellets mined at the Griffith Mine, owned by Stelco of Canada, and loaded aboard the Black Bay at the Valley Camp Dock at Thunder Bay, Ontario, at the lake head of Lake Superior. This ore, to be delivered to Stelco at their dock at Hamilton on Lake Ontario, is the last iron ore shipment out of Thunder Bay and is the last of the Upper Lakes shipments of Canadian iron ore. The Griffith Mine shutdown ended many years of Canadian iron ore movements from the Canadian Upper Lakes ports to the steel mills on the lower lakes. The end of an era. We board the Black Bay upbound light at Lock 1 of the Welland Canal. We meet the downbound loaded steamer Canadian Leader, exiting Lock 2 of the Welland. The upbound entrance to Lock 2. The lockmaster, responsible for working the gates and the valves to raise the ship. As we leave Lock 2, we meet a Salty, the Federal Danube, outbound from the Great Lakes through the St. Lawrence Seaway to the ocean.
Well, what they done, Captain, was we were to put it out when the...
Nightfall finds us entering Lock 3. The following morning, westbound on Lake Erie, the deck crew spruces up by painting the hatches and the spar deck. At the mouth of the Detroit River, we pass a downbound stem winder. The Detroit River Light at the extreme western end of Lake Erie. The American self-unloader Wolverine of the Columbia Steamship Company. The American self-unloader H. Lee White. Two laid-up Hannah boats, the Carnahan and the Humphrey, at Zug Island on the Detroit River. The Bob Lowe excursion steamer Columbia. The The last steam whistle on the Great Lakes. We salute a Canadian naval vessel. And she returns our salute. Prescott's boat brings out the mail and newspapers at Detroit. The international boundary at the center of the span of the International Bridge, the Ambassador Bridge linking Detroit, Michigan with Windsor, Ontario. The Detroit waterfront, including Renaissance Center, Cobo Hall, the docks for the Bob Lowe excursion steamers, and the old Canadian National Car Ferry Lansdowne, a side-wheeler built in the 1890s and now a floating restaurant. The Dawson Great Lakes Museum on Belle Isle in Detroit. We blow a passing signal to the Calcite II, a downbound, stone-carrying self-unloader of the United States Steel Great Lakes Fleet. Morning greets us with a beautiful day on Lake Huron. And on the horizon, the Henry Steinbrenner, one of the last remaining 600-footers built before World War I. Detour Village, the entrance to the St. Mary's River.
Voyage.
In the distance is the Stinson, the last operating Hannah boat.
I'd like to see that bounty on it.
We encounter the two sailing vessels of Brigantine Incorporated, Canadian training ships for young men, to teach them the discipline of sail, wooden ships and iron men. With a little imagination, one could picture these brigantines as the first ore carriers downbound on the St. Mary's River as it was in the 1860s and 70s. The William J. Delancey, at 1,008 feet, the largest ship on the Great Lakes. The Canadian Upper Laker Canadian Transport. The Sugar Island Ferry. The retired museum ship Valley Camp. The well-known tug barge pair Presqu'île. We approach the entrance to the MacArthur Lock of the American Sioux. Looking across the MacArthur Lock, we see a ship just leaving the larger and newer Poe Lock. This is the rushing water passing through the no longer used Davis and Sabin locks. Looking across the unloading boom of the Presqu'île, we see the museum ship Norgoma on the Canadian Sioux. The Black Bay threads her way into the MacArthur Lock. She is a maximum size for the lock. The MacArthur has viewing platforms for tourists to observe the boats locking through. The skipper, Captain Bill Robinson, has the skill of many years of command to guide his boat through the Sioux locking procedure. In the adjoining Poe Lock is the tug barge Presqu'île, upbound and ready to be raised to the Lake Superior level. The lock is now opening. We are at the Lake Superior level and will proceed into Whitefish Bay. Here you can graphically see how much lower the Lake Huron level is than the Lake Superior level. The Canadian Algoma ore dock and steel mill at Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. At the last light of day, we pass under the International Highway Peace Bridge and the rail bridges spanning the waterways between Michigan and Ontario. It's a cool morning out in the middle of Lake Superior, and we have nothing more to do than watch the seagulls. We now take a camera tour to while away the time on Lake Superior. This is the observation lounge in the passenger quarters. The forward passenger stateroom. The port passenger stateroom. The passenger's pantry and galley. Looking forward at the observation lounge. The expanse of the spar deck and her hatch crane. The after deck winches. Here we are on the boat deck, top side of the after cabin. Looking forward from the boat deck. The fantail aft with the stern mooring and anchor winch. We descend now into the engine room. This turbine on the right is her forward engine, and the one on the left is her stern engine. And this is her control console. Forward turbine and the stern turbine. An engineer records his log. The propeller shaft turning at 90 plus turns per minute. The boilers and the oil-fed burners. The sight glass for the turbine lube oil. The hydraulic steering gear. On the left is the yoke of the rudder pintle. The engineer's hatch the only communication with daylight. The engineer's workshop with a handsome assortment of machine tools. The captain's and passengers' dining room. And the galley with John the steward busy preparing a gourmet meal. We now find ourselves in the wheelhouse, with the Black Bay about to enter the port of Thunder Bay.
What's your arm there, Joe?
One of the tugs that will escort us up the river. Several of the men are put over the side on the landing boom to the tug to be taken ashore to handle the lines when we make the dock. The hatch crane proceeds to remove the hatch covers. After being turned around, this is the ore dock we will make. The out-of-service Canada Steamship Line's vessel Georgian Bay. Another tug pushes on the stern, turning the Black Bay around to make the dock stem first. The bow lines go ashore. Returning home after finishing her job. The Black Bay awaits her cargo of taconite. We take a mini side trip to explore Thunder Bay's abandoned iron ore spout loading docks, once operated by the Canadian National Railway.
Is what we call the north side of the Canadian National Railway ore dock. 100 pockets on the north side and an identical side on the opposite side of the dock with another 100 pockets used by the Canadian National Railways originally to carry ore out of Steep Rock at Atikokan and Kaelin ore to Sault Ste. Marie and to Detroit River Ports steel mills. The vessel that was built here during the war years, the Second World War, was made out of BC fir, timber only because of the shortage of steel, but has since been converted and rebuilt with steel structure, as you can see. The ore dock was built to carry ore during the demand for steel products during the last war and ordered by the Canadian National Government to be constructed for the carriage of this ore to the steel mills. The last of the ore that is moved out of Steep Rock and Kaelin ore, which was discontinued about half a dozen years ago, and there's no more need for this facility for potash. The Canadian National Railways announced this spring that they were going to knock this facility down, as it's not required any further to carry any bulk commodity.
The historical narration of the dock, courtesy of Bill Onlyak, the longtime CSL agent in Thunder Bay. Loaded ore cars were pushed out over the dock on these rails, and the bottom dump hoppers dumped the ore into the bins. The spouts were lowered into the boat's hold by this machinery. The iron ore dropped by gravity into the boat. On the horizon, we see the profile of the sleeping giant. On the way back to the Black Bay, we pass a ship boneyard, and we see the August Zeising, an old Pittsburgh Steamship Company boat, being broken up for scrap. We will now take a tour of the ore dock facility. In this shed, the loaded rail car hopper cars unload their ore from the bottom dump into a pit and onto a conveyor belt, which is then conveyed out into the yard. This is the stacker, which receives the ore from the belt and distributes it in 40-foot high piles. The stacker has a reach of 225 feet to either side. The belt has now started, and the first to come off the belt is just rainwater, which had been standing on the belt. This machine scoops up the ore on the ground and transfers it onto a lateral belt, which in turn carries it back to the stacker for deposit on the main belt down to the face of the dock. Here you see the lateral belt taking on the load. The operator sitting in this cab distributes the ore evenly into the various holds of the Black Bay. A weigh house. Each tick represents a ton of iron ore. The Black Bay will load about 25,000 tons of taconite on this trip. Sundown finds the loading complete. The following morning, out on Lake Superior, the deck crew hoses down the grime from the previous day's loading operation. A view from the top of the wheelhouse. The 12 to 4 watch in the wheelhouse.
Yeah. It's coming in there now.
Look happy.
You're on camera now, Marcel. You're on television now. He's on tape.
We approached the Sioux from Whitefish Bay. The Soo Line Railway joining the United States with Canada. Pigeons invariably join the boat at the Soo, hoping that we have a load of grain rather than taconite. A recently removed lock gate lying on the dock. Downbound, we are ordered into the same MacArthur lock that we had used upbound several days ago. The Pigeon, or rather the People Roost, Spectators Gallery. House flags of the various steamship companies line the MacArthur Lock. The powerful electric deck winches.
Off by then. 6 weeks. No, I think I'll stay in St. Catharines. What? I think I'll stay in St. Catharines for that. Party time, huh? Can't take it anymore. Only it's big. Yeah.
That's fast. Really Booker. Our cheeks flapped in the wind. Bye.
The Black Bay has its own groupies at the Soo.
me look serious or look like I'm really busy?
Captain Bill Robinson. We blow for the Ford fleet's Ernest R. Breach. And she gives us a salute back.
I should have been like John and take it going this way. I like it better. Stretch. I'm surprised he's still running.
The lower St. Mary's River at sunset. The following morning, the deck crew breaks out the tools to chip paint, a time-worn occupation of a seaman. The Blue Water Bridge at Port Huron, the northern entrance of the St. Clair River. The old decommissioned Huron lightship. the Canadian straightdecker J. N. McWaters of the Meisner fleet.
Blue one. And all the Greek ships are blue, and we used to kid them.
The American self-unloader Paul Thayer makes the dock at Port Huron.
Yeah, he is. He's got a boat backwards.
The Prairie Harvest, the largest boat in the Canada Steamship Line fleet.
I don't even like taking pictures.
The St. Clair Inn, a very famous hotel and restaurant on the St. Clair River shores. The American Steamship Company's American Republic discharging coal at the Detroit Edison plant on the St. Clair River. The Little Marine City Ferry, plying her trade from Canada to the United States. The self-unloader Canadian Enterprise, upbound. sailing wing and wing. This is the Polish sloop that got lost on the Great Lakes in the summer of 1986. We take a tour of the windlass room. No, they are not sprinkling along. The deck is sprinkled to lower its temperature so as to reduce our draft for transiting the Welland Canal. When the spar deck gets hot from the beating sun, it expands, causing the curvature to increase the draft at the stem and the stern. An American destroyer awaits her entry into the Welland Canal at Port Colborne. A pair of tugs waits to take the destroyer in. It's ironic that a 730-foot oarboat can enter and navigate the Welland Canal unaided, whereas a naval destroyer requires 2 tugs just to make Port Colborne. Oh well, it's just taxpayer money.
Everyone's been talking about the good neighbor Chevy dealer 86 closeout sale. And today, we're going to find out what the hoopla is all about. We're flying over the distribution staging area.
Summer fun for a bunch of kids. The fishing fleet of Port Colborne. The abandoned smaller locks of many years ago. Lock 8 with an upbound freighter coming through. A Lake Erie gas well drilling rig. Over the side to handle the lines at Lock 8. Canada Steamship Line's beautiful straight-decker Richelieu, exiting Lock 8.
You have good weather up home?
hopping crazy, Carl. You'll get summer when you get off in your next shot.
The skipper of the Richelieu is an old buddy of Captain Robinson. And he has his own private flower garden. The city of Port Colborne maintains beautiful flower gardens in its canal park. The gates open and we are released from Lock 8. A float from the recent Canal Days parade. The Marine Salvage Company's scrapyard in Port Colborne. The steamers Philip Block, Inland Steel, and John Dykstra, Ford Fleet, await the scrapper's torch. We meet a seedy-looking Greek salty. The Algo Sioux, undergoing repairs after a disastrous fire in her after end. An opportunity to see what a quart nozzle looks like. Very trim lines.
Female.
The captain prepares our entry into Lock 7. The device he is using is the engine room telegraph, calling for engine speed changes. Very heavy lock gate protection cable. After a drop of about 47 feet, the gates open and we leave the lock. Entering Lock 6, the first of the flight locks. One of the crew members' wives brings his son for him to admire. Again, the heavy guard cable. We look down on the 3 flight locks, 6, 5, and 4, from atop the wheelhouse. The total descent here will be about 140 feet. The flight locks are twinned to accommodate and separate upbound and downbound traffic.
Great. Hang on to her.
Yeah, I was just telling Ray she's quite a sight in the wintertime when it's all drained.
On leaving Lock 4, we meet the Canadian Progress. She has just come out of Lock 3. The remnants of the Second Welland Canal. Entering Lock 3. This lock has a public viewing stand. some of the public. The Victory Chimes, a reconstruction of a three-masted schooner, built to relive the windjammer days before the turn of the century. Hundreds of these sturdy vessels plied the Great Lakes shipping lanes. At dusk, we enter Lock 2. At daybreak the following morning, we find ourselves tied up at the Stelco dock in Hamilton, and the unloading of our iron ore cargo has proceeded. This dock mounts two Meade Morrison bridge unloaders with 15-ton capacity clamshell buckets. About 18 hours are required to unload the Black Bay of her taconite cargo. The fuel lighter Hamilton Energy draws alongside to replenish our fuel bunkers. Fueling complete, she casts off. The starboard side tank springs a leak caused by a clam bucket hitting the steel too hard. A crewman marks the fracture with spray paint. Paint. Welders are dispatched to the area immediately to patch the damaged plate. Canada Steamship Line's Tadoussac backs into the dock next to unload her ore cargo. The bulk of the ore having been unloaded, they lower bulldozers into the hold to scrape up the remaining ore. overfilling the side tanks.
They must really fill up in a hurry, because they couldn't have welded that without...
Unloading finished, they haul out the bulldozers. And the hatch crane lifts the covers and places them over the open hatches. The Black Bay departs Hamilton and proceeds up the Welland on another trip.